Hey everyone, this is Neil, and before starting the walkthrough, I would like to first explain you a bit how I started the main idea of this song that later on I sent to Omiru. So this is the main idea that I came up with. It's just some basic melody and just the root notes actually from the chords. As you can see, it's in E major or C sharp minor, and if you haven't heard it already, here it's how it sounds. So as you can hear, it's not a complex melody. It's quite simple and repetitive, but I would say it's quite effective as it's easy to remember, in my opinion. And for the second part, it's pretty much the same, except that I changed a bit the ending here instead of going down to F sharp like in the first part. So it kind of gives that ending feeling. For the chords, I used this main progression, which is A major, C sharp minor, E major, and F sharp minor, which is quite unique actually. It's not very heard in many rock songs, especially this one, this chord here, which adds some more emotional thing to the melody, as you can see. And for the next 4 bars, I did the same except for the last chord, which I changed it to B major. So it has this kind of more conclusive feeling that it's pretty cool in my opinion. For the second part of the drop, I also used the same chords, so it's just the melody changing. I didn't want to make it very complicated, that's why I kept the same chords. So yeah, I made this melody and then I sent it to Omiru. He saw some potential in it, so he told me that I could start a break or some kind of an idea. So that's what I did, but I'm not going to talk about my break work for my site, but Omiru will do it. I will instead show you my drop work, which is pretty much all the drop, because Omiru I think added some little extra things here and there later, but it's pretty much my work. And actually for the drop, I first made one drop idea, but as it was pretty long ago, we decided that we could give it another try, as I kind of improved in mixing and sound design. So I made this other drop idea, which is a bit better in my opinion. So it sounds like this. Let's first start with the leads that sound like this. As you can see, I used quite a lot of layers actually, but it's sounding great in my opinion. So I won't go very much in depth with the different layers, but instead I can show you a bit how I made them and the processing. So it's basically silent one layers, as you can see, but I also added some more organic layers like a viola and a piano, a guitar, and a synth shot from musical. About the processing, I mainly did some EQ, some compression with OTT, some saturation, EQ, more EQ, some reverb with the peak controller thing that Severman uses, some fresh air to excite a bit more the highs, and yeah, some filter for the transition here, and some sidechain, which is basically the first preset around 55%. Moving next to the chords, they sound like this. And they consist mainly of some silent one layers too, and some piano layers. So there are some silent one layers which sound like this, and some other piano layers which sound like this. And I think combined sounds quite full, which is what I wanted for the chords. For the processing, I also put this EQ here, some OTT, some equalizer, some saturation, more EQ, some reverb as well with a big controller, some EQ, and what I did here is a nice thing that you can try, is removing the lobes, but only from the side channel. So what this makes is making the chords a bit more cleaner, because I already removed the lobes here, but I wanted that part around 250 to be a bit more in the center, so it's not that much muddy. I added some filter for the transition as well, and some sidechain that I used this preset here. Moving on to the mid bass, it sounds like this. And as you can see, I added those little slides here and there that add some more movement to the bass and to the drum. I used 4 silent one layers, which sound like that. And for the processing, I used an EQ, some OTT, some camel crusher, some saturation, some more EQ, an effector to give that like a box effect, some more EQ as well with the side high pass, and some frequency balance and filter for the transition here, as well as some sidechain. I used this preset. For the sub, I used this sub preset on Silent 1, which is pretty simple actually. It's just some sine waves. It sounds like this. And I process it with some camel crusher, some EQ, cutting the highs, and some more EQ to control this resonance that was a bit too loud. Some balance here to control the volume on the transition, and some sidechain, which I grabbed this wave, this preset, but I moved it a bit to the right so it doesn't clash with the cake. I have some art, a kind of Manse art that I made with Vital, and sounds like this. For the processing, it's nothing crazy here. Just removing some lows and some highs, some OTT and reverb, and also some filter for automation and some sidechain. I also added a hoover here. Which is just a silent one layer. And it has this nice light at the beginning of every 2 bars. And this adds some more energy to the drop, which is nice. So moving on to the drums, I have this kick, which is the same, it's the Felicity kick. It's the same I use on pretty much all my drops. Some claps, I added this one on the second half of the drop. Some rides, this one is making the same rhythm as the melody, and this one is playing on every beat as the kick. I also added some nice fills, which makes the drop a bit more interesting, and some percussion and shakers here. All the drums together sound a bit like this. Yeah, for the effects, I usually use some downlifters, some ambience, and some crashes. So this is what I did for the downlifters. I also added some ambience. And some crashes. Here I have some impacts on the transition and on the ending of the drop, which sound like this, and some uplifters and risers. Also, a quite important thing that I did for the effects is these automations here that you can see, which basically turn off the sidechain at the beginning of the drop and here on the transition, and it kind of gives the drop a bit more attack and impact when it starts. So yeah, it does make some big difference actually. As you can see, without the automation it would sound like that, and with the automation like this. It's a cool trick that you can try, and it works well for my drops at least. So yeah, that would be pretty much all my work for the drop. And yeah, as I said, I first made one small draft for the break, but that will be explained by Omiru. He really transformed the break and ended up sounding really cool in my opinion. So yeah, that's all for my side, and now Omiru will explain you how he made the breaks.
Hey everyone, this is Omiru, and now we are going to look at the project file of Where Have You Been, which I made together with Nil. And yeah, let me start by showing you the first idea that Nil sent me a little over a year ago. So he made this drop idea, which sounded like this. So yeah, I really liked the idea, but I asked him if he could work on it a bit more and maybe make a little break idea for the track, and here's what he did. So yeah, that was his break idea for the track, and that's from where I continued working on it. So yeah, let's check out what we have here in the track. So first up there are these piano chords. Like very simple and straightforward. This one is from Addictive Keys and Nexus. And yeah, then I changed the piano a bit, so there are more rhythm in the chords. Yeah, and in the build-up, the chords are playing the same rhythm as the drop chords. Yeah, let's quickly look at the processing. So there are some EQ, OTT, some reverb, some more EQ, and these are for automations. Then here we have this 4-bar intro where we have a top piano melody which plays the drop melody. And then here a bit later in the breaks I also have another top piano melody playing. And then there is this pad, which is from Spire. Yeah, here is a little bit of processing going on with the EQ, OTT, a little bit of chorus, then another EQ and some filters for these automations. And then there is this respace which Nil added. This one is from Serum. With the respace there aren't actually any processing, except I have this frequency splitter for reducing the lows when there is the kick playing later on in the breaks. And then there is this guitar loop. And then another one. Yeah, so I chopped this one because originally it sounded like this. And then this was actually the last thing that I added to this track. So there is this funk guitar loop. Which give the track overall, I think, a nice unique touch. And then there is this strummed guitar which Neil added. As well as a few other loops like strings and guitar Yeah, and then there is this piano loop which plays in the beginning of the track. And then there is this ARP thing from Nil. And here are the actual ambient loops. And all together they sound like this. And then here we have some effect sounds and one shots and so on. Yeah, and then there are few more effect sounds like for the transition and stuff. Yeah, and here I'm introducing the drums. So first there is this fill as well as this hi-hat loop. And then I'm introducing all of the drums. So yeah, then we can move on to the build-up. So here in the build-up there is this piano which I already showed you, and then the Reese bass as well as some of the elements from the breaks, like not all of them. And here are the leads, and the leads have a few automations like cutoff filters and one for the sidechain, and then there is additional reverb for the build-up. Yeah, and then there are the drop chords. And the drop chords have also a few automations, cutoff filter, volume automation, yeah, and another high pass filter. So yeah, then there are these actual build-up elements like risers, uplifters, snares, and so on. And then here are the snares for the build-up. And then there are some other drum sounds for the fills and so on. And yeah, here are the pre-drop fills. And now we can move on to the drop. But since Neil already explained what he did, and it's pretty much all of his sounds here, so there's not much for me to explain here. But yeah, here are the ambient sounds and the ARP, the leads, the synth chords, mid bass, the sub bass, the downlifters, and the drums. But what I did here was I added these few drum loops, for example. Let me show you those. Yeah, and then I actually reworked all the drop fills to make them more unique. Yeah, and then I also added a few more fill sounds to the end of the drop. As well as these effect sounds. And then I also did this clap fill here. And now we can move on to the second break. Let's take a quick listen first.
I never thought I could be this happy. You never judge, you love every part of me. Every day we spend together, forever young and free. Feels like I'm living inside of a dream. I just wanna stay right here and melt into your arms. I just wanna stay right here, yeah, like where I belong. I just can't believe it's real, I think I found the one. I'll wait.
Alright, so there are a few new things that I added here to the second break. So the first one is this staccato string pattern, which is from the Labs plugin. And then there are these staccato chords, and these consist of two different sounds. The other one is from the Labs plugin again, and the one is from Flex. And here, if we quickly look at the processing, I have the stereo enhancer to widen them a bit, then OTT with little tweaks here and there, then transpire to add more attack to the strings, and then a delay, reverb, and an EQ. And otherwise, all of the other elements are the same, except I changed the drum beat a little bit, so it's not just a straight 4/4 rhythm here in the first 4 bars.
I just wanna stay right here and melt into your arms. I just wanna stay right here, yeah, like we.
Yeah, and here is the automation for the respace. I can show you. So this is what I did with the frequency splitter. So you don't have to reduce the volume of the whole frequency spectrum, but you can just take this low band and make the sidechain with only that.
I just wanna stay right here and melt into your arms. I just wanna stay right here, yeah, like we.
Then we can move on to the break.
Where have you been all my life? Where have you been all this time?
So here, as you can hear, there are the cinematic drums, which are new, but first I can show you there is this violin that I added. Yeah, and then we can look at the drums. So here are those. And then there is the second build-up. So the differences are now, instead of playing the respace for the full build-up, I have it only here in the first part of it. And then here I also added the drop arp, which starts after the first 4 bars in the build-up. And then the second riser here starts from the second part of the build-up. And well, here I chopped the leads and the chords so they stay on one chord like this. Same with the drop chords. So yeah, that's the second build-up, and in the second drop there's nothing new except this one riser which I added. Yeah, otherwise everything else the same as it was in the first drop. So that's now pretty much everything for the instrumental side. Now we can take a look at the vocals.
I never thought I was worthy.
So here I did this reverse vocal effect sound. It's done with the basic technique, like I recorded this first part with a lot of reverb and then bounced it and then reversed it. Yeah, and let's take a look at the processing of the vocal. So here I have this simple EQ, and then I have the compressor here. And yeah, here for the other stems which play on the right and the left channel, I took out a bit more from the lower and the higher frequencies to give more space to the actual lead vocal.
I just wanna stay right here and melt into your arms. I just wanna stay right here, yeah, right where I belong.
Yeah, and well, then there are some other stems for the vocals, like background vocals, harmonies, and so on. The one thing that I'd like to show you are these 2 automations that I have. So here, as you can see, it's a little thing, but with this I am controlling the volume of the delay of the vocal. So since there is only this one stem playing, I increase the volume a bit to give more space for the vocal.
I never thought I was worthy of love.
Yeah, and here, when there are more stems coming in, I'm reducing the volume again. And here I am increasing the volume of the delay in the parts where the vocal is not playing.
Where have you been? On my
And then here I have this second automation, which is for the reverb instead. So this one is otherwise fully turned off. throughout the song, but here in certain parts when the vocal stops, I'm doing these reverb tails with it.
Where have you been? Where have you been? Oh.
So let me show you how it would sound like without all these effects.
Where have you been?
And now with the effects on.
Where have you been?
And then, okay, let me show you the vocal bus where I did the processing for all of these stems. So first up, there is this basic EQ. Then there is the compressor, sound godizer. Then there is this Valhalla Supermassive, which I used for, I think I put the vocal in its own space with this, so the mix is only 9%. And then there is like more Surgic EQ for the vocal. And then here in this bus I have the actual reverb for the vocal, so I'm using this one here. Then I did some EQ for the reverb, and then I have Fruity Balance for controlling the volume of the reverb. And here in the vocal bus I have the Fruity Peak controller, which I use to control the volume of the reverb. And yeah, here are all the own buses for the vocal stems, but most of these I've just routed into the vocal bus, except these two I routed those into their own bus and did the EQ here, but otherwise all of these are routed straight to this vocal bus. And one more thing that I'd like to show you from the vocal is this thing that I did for the ad-libs. So I made this like old radio or telephone filter, this one, which makes the vocal sound in certain parts like this.
Where have you been? Time.
Yeah, and I think that sounded pretty nice in the context. So take a look with all the vocals.
Where have you been? All my life. Where have you been? All this time. I didn't realize what I'm missing. Now I'm falling in. Oh, where have you been?
So yeah, I think that's one cool way to make your vocals sound interesting, but you always have to have the purpose for doing it. So yeah, for the last thing that I'd like to show you is the intro and outro. So once again here I combined some of the elements from the breaks and the drops. So for example here I used the top piano, and then I have this guitar loop as well as the funk guitar. And yeah, there are some of the loops from the breaks. And here are a couple ambience loops from the drop. And here I have the ARP from the drop. This one is like filtered down. And here I have the drums, so I have the kick playing here with the where I rolled some of the lower frequencies, so it's more like a top kick playing here. And then I added some of the drums from the drop as well as the fills. Here in the second part of the intro I removed the high pass filter, And then I added this shaker loop here, and then there are some of the build-up elements. And here in the outro there are pretty much all the same elements as were in the intro. Okay guys, so that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Hopefully you learned something new as well. And be sure to check out the track if you still haven't done so. Thank you.